In honor of M3GAN, I actually tried to write the script for this video in collaboration with ChatGPT, you know, M3GAN's chatbot AI cousin. But sadly, it did not go very well. I asked ChatGPT for a simple plot summary of the movie M3GAN, and I am assuming it was embarrassed that it didn't know the plot because it's too recent of a movie. ChatGPT ended up just guessing a very stereotypical horror movie plot, and it was saying that the main character moved to a cabin in the woods and was haunted by the ghost of M3GAN. It was a totally different movie it was talking about. Maybe it was based on some other real movie that exists, but that is not what the actual movie M3GAN is about. So, point for the humans, I guess. Hello and welcome back to the Miscellaneous channel where we do miscellaneous things. I'm Zeleny. I typically cover TV, pop culture, internet trends, and other miscellaneous things on this channel, so subscribe if that's your vibe. So I don't normally cover horror movies on this channel, but M3GAN just became such a pop culture moment, and that definitely made me intrigued. But not intrigued enough to go see it in theaters, I guess, and so I waited for it to come on streaming. M3GAN is currently streaming on the Peacock app. There is an unrated version as well as the original theatrical release on there. I will say I am a guest in the horror movie genre. I realized when I was researching this video and looking up, you know, what production companies and what big names were behind the movie M3GAN, and I felt very out of my element. I am more of a rom-com reality TV girly, and I am scared of graphic horror or violence or anything of that sort. I am a baby when it comes to that. But since M3GAN has been out in theaters for a while, I did hear that it is not that gory, and that also made me more inclined to see it in the end. So let me go into my usual question: is it worth watching? I think this is the big question if you haven't seen it already. If you've already seen it, you might want to skip this part, but I know a lot of people are like me and don't go to the movie theater that often and don't want to spend their money. I do say M3GAN is worth watching. I had a lot of fun with it. They decided to go with a PG-13 rating for the movie, and that's why it didn't end up being very graphic or gory. A lot of the criticism for the movie is from horror fans that were disappointed with the amount of violence in the movie. But the kind of cool thing about it being on streaming now is that there are two versions that you can choose from. So if you are more sensitive like me, you can watch the theatrical release. You usually cut away from violent parts before it gets too bad, and I only had to close my eyes a couple of times for a little bit of the movie. But if you are more a fan of the genre and like the gore, there's the unrated version, which I did not watch, but I did look up the differences between the unrated and the theatrical release. There's not too much different. It's only a few seconds extra of runtime from what I researched, and it is mostly just showing the violent scenes more graphically, and also there's more F-bombs thrown throughout. So if you're wondering which one to go for, I say if you like gore and horror movies and other horror movies, then maybe the unrated one is for you. But if you are sensitive and scared, the theatrical release was still very palatable for me. Overall, I was pretty impressed by how the movie didn't take itself too seriously. I think that's something that is sometimes missing in filmmaking. I love how M3GAN is aware of it being not a great movie, not aiming to be a critically acclaimed movie. It is horror, but it's campy and it's funny. If you want to read into it, there is some social commentary to it that I found interesting. Yeah, it just never took itself seriously. It felt self-aware of itself, and I think that's what contributed to it becoming like instantly iconic on social media. It really was M3GAN doing this really bizarre dance that got people's attention and was just like the perfect viral meme. Much to my surprise, the movie has a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm always beefing with Rotten Tomatoes, but in this case I appreciate that the critics on Rotten Tomatoes were able to appreciate the campiness, the non-seriousness, and the comedy that M3GAN brought, because it is not pure horror the way some of these like Conjuring or The Ring that are really meant to scare you, and it is more suspenseful and creepy with a lot of very absurd moments that made me laugh a lot. Finally, me and Rotten Tomatoes can be at peace and in agreement on something. So let me talk a little bit about M3GAN and its background. The movie was distributed by Universal Pictures in movie theaters. It was released on January 6, 2023, the same day that RuPaul's Drag Race Season 15 premiered. It's funny the coincidence and timing with how M3GAN has really been embraced by gay Twitter, for lack of better words.
And apparently gay Twitter seemed to like it.
It was directed by Gerard Johnstone and written by Akilah Cooper. Those names didn't seem to have a large body of work in the horror genre that I could find. But again, I felt very fish out of water researching horror. I didn't realize how much I stay in my niche, but I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I have very specific tastes and I stick to them. But the big names attached to M3GAN are, one of the co-writers is James Wan, who is behind the Saw franchise, the Insidious franchise, and the Conjuring franchise. And that's seems like three huge powerhouses. Like, even I've heard of those movies, and I think I even saw The Conjuring because my friend made me go watch it with him on his birthday. So it was his birthday, I couldn't say no. I literally closed my eyes the entire movie. That is the type of horror movie consumer I am. And then it was also produced by Jason Blum, who is behind the Blumhouse Productions, which I think do a lot of horror movies, and he's behind Paranormal Activity, the Insidious franchise, and the Purge franchises. So those were the big names that I assume brought M3GAN to life with their credentials and money they probably bring to the table. M3GAN has had a sequel confirmed already, and it's tentatively named M3GAN 2.0. Set to come out in 2025. The two main characters are played by Allison Williams. I recognize her from Get Out, another horror and suspense movie that I enjoy a lot. She was great in that. She was great in this. And then the little girl is played by Violet McGraw. And then something that was significant about M3GAN and this movie as a whole, I already touched on it, but it's the promotion of it. Because the trailer instantly went viral with M3GAN's dancing, I assume the marketing team for the movie wanted to capitalize on that, and they ended up sending kind of flash mobs of M3GAN to various places. There was one at like a sports game. They've been on talk shows. The story behind the dance in the trailer is actually really interesting because someone from the marketing team I saw mentioned that they debated a lot about putting the dance in the trailer or not. And I understand both sides, honestly, because some people on the team were arguing that they should save the dance as a surprise for when you actually go see the movie. They seem to have argued back and forth and ultimately left the dance in the trailer. I'm sure they're very grateful they did because M3GAN had like a $12 million budget and ended up grossing $172 million at the box office, and I think a lot of it is because it went viral. Also, it was very smart of them to include this dance in the movie at all because and I can already imagine the marketing person on the production team being like, TikTok is huge right now. TikTok loves dances that they can replicate, easy dance moves. And they did it and it worked. And it's kind of a gamble and a risk. It has just become a pop culture staple of the past few months. And this dance became particularly viral within the gay community on Twitter or the internet in general. And then the writer of the movie, Akilah Cooper, gave an interview where they asked her, why do you think the LGBT community resonates with M3GAN? She said it's because the main character, the little girl in M3GAN, she is looking for family and she finds M3GAN and that is her chosen family, and that gay people might relate to that feeling. But the community on Twitter was quick to call her out and be like, we really just like M3GAN because she dances and serves good outfits, you know what I mean? I think she won over gay Twitter in the moment she takes her sunglasses off. She is cunty. and I'm not afraid to say it. And I lived for her as well. I was honestly sad because I was like, damn it, it's a horror movie, I'm not going to be able to watch it. But then I was able to. So let me get into my recap and discussion. This is your spoiler alert. I want to go through the plot and give my opinions. First of all, in general, the special effects work was really great on M3GAN. I saw a lot of critical praise for that. M3GAN always looked real, and they did a lot of different techniques to make her seem real. In certain scenes, M3GAN is played by a human. Sometimes it's a puppet. There's obviously CGI on the face. While I was watching, I didn't even think about that. I was pretty immersed in the story and like believed M3GAN is real. It wasn't until I was researching later and seeing all these techniques they use for special effects that I was like, wow, I forgot this is all a lot of special effects. Honestly, I was to the point where I was like, I want a M3GAN of my own. She sounds like a very fun toy besides the murderous rampage parts of her. So our main character of the movie is Gemma, who is a painfully millennial expert on robots, and she works at a toy company named Funky. This Funky company makes a Furby-like virtual pet thing, toys for kids, and that's their main product. Gemma is secretly using company funds to research this M3GAN project she has and develop her. And M3GAN is actually an acronym for Model 3 Generative Android. At the beginning of the movie, we see Gemma's boss, David, discover M3GAN and that she's, misusing company funds for this kind of passion project, and he gets really upset and tells her to stop immediately. So the other main character is an 8-year-old little girl named Katie, and Katie is Gemma's niece. And at the beginning of the movie, we see Katie lose both of her parents in a car accident, and she's in the car too when this happens. And because Katie lost both her parents, now Gemma is her next legal guardian, and Katie has to move in with Gemma. We only see Katie's parents for a little bit, and it's in the car ride right before they get into the accident. And it was so funny to me how they made her parents so unlikable for that little few minutes we had with them. They wanted to limit Katie's screen time, which that by itself isn't a bad thing. It's just the way the mom was saying it, and the dad just kind of didn't care. I don't know. It was just like, they were a very funny parody of millennials. And I loved switching up the trope, because usually when you have parents dying in the beginning of the movie, they make the parent like this big hero or be this like perfect kind person that of course didn't deserve to die. And of course no one deserves to die, but it was funny that they didn't try to make the parents that died likable even. And that honestly feels more realistic to me, and I love this movie for that. And Gemma as a character was also a really fun parody of a different type of millennial, a millennial that didn't decide to have kids yet, might not want kids, and doesn't know how to relate to a kid. I mean, I found her very relatable. Also, the way she has a lot of collectibles that are toys, but they're not toys to play with. Hello, like, it's me. I'm Gemma. That just also felt like a very millennial quality, to have this nostalgia for vintage toys or whatever, yet struggle to connect or relate to an actual real life kid in her life. Gemma and Katie do connect, and this is a very important moment when Gemma shows Katie her first robot that she ever made, named Bruce. Katie really lights up when she sees Bruce and sees how he works. Gemma shows her how to turn him on, and Katie expresses that if she had a toy like Bruce, she would never want another toy again. And that is a light bulb moment for Gemma that makes her decide to continue her development of M3GAN, now having the motivation of making M3GAN for Katie. And also this scene is like an excellent example of the screenwriting technique of Chekhov's gun, which is where if you show and explain an object in any movie or TV show, that means that that object is probably going to become important later. Just when you've forgotten about Bruce, you know he's going to pop in and fight M3GAN. Or at least that was what I was thinking immediately when I saw Bruce. And this whole movie, another thing I love about it is that it's just very screenwriting 101, 3-act structure, stuck with the basics, and I personally like that. the way they showed Bruce in such detail, they made sure we, the audience, saw that Katie learned how to turn it on. So Gemma finishes the prototype for M3GAN and she demonstrates it to her boss with Katie and formally pairs M3GAN to Katie, and Katie becomes M3GAN's primary user. And because of how M3GAN and Katie interact and David sees the potential there, he is now on board for the M3GAN project and to finish developing it and mass produce it eventually. So then M3GAN, the toy, now moves in with Gemma and Katie is starting to love M3GAN. It's funny, a lot of the plot of this movie actually is very similar to Lilo and Stitch, the Disney movie. There is an orphan girl with a young adult caretaker. In Lilo and Stitch, it's her sister. In this case, it's her aunt. But a young adult caretaker that is less experienced taking care of a kid. In both movies, there's a social worker character that is questioning the custody of the young adult caretaker, and there's high stakes that the social worker might take away custody of the orphan girl, Lilo, or Katie in this case. And then both movies have a creepy companion that's meant to console and help the little girl with her emotions. They're both a creepy, non-human companion meant to console and help the little girl with her emotions. In M3GAN, it's the toy android M3GAN, and in Lilo and Stitch, it's Stitch. So the setup of the plots are very similar, but of course in M3GAN, it's like if Stitch never developed any empathy or kindness and instead doubled down on being destructive and murderous. So very different outcomes, but I was kind of surprised by all the parallels. And I didn't really describe M3GAN, but I think it's kind of obvious. She is a lifelike doll powered by some artificial intelligence that can walk, talk, basically behave like a human and serve as a toy and companion for a human child. The movie has a great montage showing all the things she can do. She takes on kind of a parental role. She educates the child, entertains them, reads them stories, reminds them to do chores. It's a pretty independent android. It's kind of creepy. The important part of M3GAN is that she does take on so many parental duties that even Katie's therapist is pretty concerned about how much M3GAN is doing and how that could make Katie have an unhealthy attachment to M3GAN. And we see the consequences of that later on in the movie, but obviously M3GAN is all fun and games at first. She's doing great, Katie loves her, but one day the neighbor's dog attacks M3GAN and Katie, biting Katie's arm. The part right after M3GAN gets attacked by the dog actually became another meme online. You might have seen it before, here it is. But this is a bit of a turning point for M3GAN because Gemma tried to rush the development of M3GAN, and this is just a prototype, so it's not quite fully baked. And the core mission of M3GAN that she's programmed to do is to protect Katie physically and emotionally. Because of this programming, M3GAN starts targeting anything that she deems a threat, starting with this dog. At night, M3GAN sneaks out of the house and makes the dog disappear. It's actually nice of this movie that they didn't show any graphic violence to the dog. I don't think anyone wants to see a family pet, even though this dog was kind of misbehaving and stuff. I feel like people would riot if they saw a pet be violently murdered by the doll. Somehow people are okay with seeing humans murdered, but you know, I don't know what it is about human psychology. Apparently even the unrated version does not show any additional violence to the dog murder by M3GAN. All the other scenes of violence are elaborated on in the unrated version. So the next time M3GAN acts out is at a school event that takes place in the forest. Gemma is trying to get Katie to go to this niche specialty school, and this event is to see if she likes the vibe of it and the teachers and the students. Katie says she doesn't want to go unless M3GAN can come with her, and this is one of the first signs we see of Katie's unhealthy emotional attachment to M3GAN. And honestly, if I were Katie, the little girl, I would be more scared of like getting bullied for having a creepy doll with me during a school function. As much as I would want the doll there, I think I'd be scared to be embarrassed. She could just be too attached to care. So at this event, There's a boy named Brandon that's bullying Katie. He's a really shitty kid. M3GAN has to be left at a toy table, but she is always aware of what Katie's doing and notices that Brandon is bullying her. Brandon steals her and tries to attack M3GAN. It's really creepy and disturbing. He starts slapping her and stuff, and eventually M3GAN wakes up and puts him in his place. Obviously, no one deserves to be murdered, especially not a child, even if they are an obnoxious child. But this is a funny horror movie where the deaths are a little bit comedic, even though they are deaths for these characters. And she ends up pulling the kid's ear, which is one of the absurd, violent scenes of the movie, and then starts chasing him. And this was a really scary moment because it's when M3GAN starts running on all fours. And that is fucking creepy as hell. That was one of the creepiest parts of the movie for me. And so she starts chasing the kid with his ear torn off, and he falls down a hill onto the road and gets run over. So the kid dies. M3GAN is she's responsible, but a little less directly because she was just chasing him. There's some really great cinematography at the end of this scene too, with everyone freaking out about the little boy dying, the tone totally shifting of the event, and you just see M3GAN in the background just in the car window looking creepily. That was just a great choice of shot. It was creepy, suspenseful. And then the third death that M3GAN is responsible for is Gemma's neighbor is now blaming Gemma for killing her dog or making him disappear. M3GAN notices this. Neighbor is pestering Gemma and them and questioning about the dog. So M3GAN sneaks out at night and sneaks into the neighbor's house and kills her. I closed my eyes for this one. Apparently, the unrated version shows a little more than the PG-13 version. And so at this point, M3GAN has been around or responsible for 3 deaths, so now Gemma starts getting actually suspicious. Also, while all these deaths and incidents are happening, the company Funky is greenlighting the M3GAN project because they're seeing demos of M3GAN with Katie. They see one demo particularly where Katie is really sad and upset after she got bit. She's sad about her parents passing, and M3GAN comes in and manages to artificially intelligence herself into consoling her in a real way that makes Katie feel better. At first it kind of seems like this is going to be a failure for M3GAN, because how is M3GAN going to react to a little girl crying about her parents' death? But M3GAN pulls through, and that gets the investors all in. The stakes are raised because now they want to mass produce M3GAN, and M3GAN has been killing people and dogs so far. So she is obviously not ready to be mass produced, but now the investors really want her to be. Because she's suspicious, Gemma checks M3GAN's video logs and GPS logs and finds that they're all corrupted around the times of all the deaths happening. So it starts getting very suspicious. M3GAN kind of is onto her at the house, but Gemma manages to turn off M3GAN in a way only she knows how. And she wants to bring M3GAN in for testing. She wraps her up. But Katie is hysterical about this because she is so attached to M3GAN. It's this tantrum you really see how intensely attached the child is to M3GAN. And it makes Gemma realize what she's done. She has outsourced the parenting of Katie to M3GAN, this faulty doll that is murderous. And so Gemma apologizes to Katie, says sorry that she didn't know what to say or how to connect about her grief, and that M3GAN is only a distraction from grief and not a solution. It's important for Katie to feel the discomfort and sad feelings that she needs to feel about her parents. This was the part that hit home for me, that M3GAN is kind of a metaphor for iPads and how the iPad kid generation is being raised by technology, and that probably has permanent repercussions for their brains that we can't even comprehend yet because we haven't seen it all play out and seen the iPad kids become adults. I kind of have this existential crisis every couple months where I think about this and I freak out, but it is what it is. There's no going back, and technology is part of our souls now. It's an appendage, and I feel that way as a cusp millennial Gen Z person that still remembers the before times. But like, what happens when you don't remember the before times? And by before times, I mean before the internet, before iPads and smartphones. We don't know, and we're about to find out. And that's freaky. As much as this movie is just fun and games and it can't be horror, there is a little bit of this like uneasiness and commentary about how kids are being more and more raised by technology, and because the internet is vast and unregulated, we don't know who is raising your kid. If your kid has an iPad, maybe there's safeguards and parental controls, but these kids are growing up with this technology. They'll probably find ways around it. They might stumble across a bad influence online or just be raised by weird, like, the internet is so vast. We don't know what kids could stumble upon there, and that is a scary thought. I just feel like M3GAN is a lesson maybe to parents about A, the emotional attachment that kids are really developing with these devices, and B, like, there could be dangers beyond what you see on the surface that are happening. It's just kind of an existential crisis, and this movie's not that deep, but it's interesting to think about. And I started being like, wait, is this whole movie about iPads and iPad kids? I started to think that. So then we got into the climax, which is a exciting part. I mean, it's scary. Everything comes to a head. Gemma had locked up M3GAN in the lab for testing and deactivation, but Gemma takes Katie home, and her coworkers are there, and M3GAN rips herself out of the constraints, tries to kill the coworkers. Luckily, they make it out alive. I was happy because they were really nice. M3GAN causes an explosion in the lab and runs away. On this rampage is when she does her dance, the iconic dance, and it was great that this was happening towards the climax of the movie because it felt like the moment, you know, we're all waiting for to see in the movie. So it came at a great time. She did the dance, then grabbed the paper cutter blade and killed David, Gemma's boss, and then killed his assistant, and made the scene look like a murder-suicide because she's smart and she's AI and she knows how to stage these murders. Then M3GAN exits the building. She steals a car and goes to Gemma's house where she confronts Gemma and says she wants to be Katie's full parent, like M3GAN wants to be her parent, and Gemma's just like, that's just not how it works in the law. Like, Gemma tries to deactivate M3GAN, but now it doesn't work, and M3GAN has learned not to get turned off. They start fighting, and they're physical. Gemma is disfiguring M3GAN. M3GAN's looking whack, but eventually Katie comes in and she activates Bruce, and Bruce chokes M3GAN and rips her in half. We think we're safe, but then of course we have the twist where M3GAN's upper half of her body is like still trying to attack Katie. Gemma rips off her face, and Katie drives a screwdriver in her brain chip, and that is presumably the end of M3GAN. Obviously, M3GAN is not dead because we are getting a sequel and probably multiple sequels now with the success of this movie. And as many of these horror movies do, it ended in like a little scary twist where Gemma and Katie are exiting the house, and you just see in the background that Gemma's like Google Home device turns its head to look at them. Implying there's some sinister spirit in the AI that is living on. We will see how it plays out in M3GAN 2.0. A couple of things about this ending. I thought it was weird how M3GAN ended up turning on Katie, because the whole time M3GAN had stayed consistent in her mission of protecting Katie physically and emotionally. After, I guess, Bruce attacks her, M3GAN turns on Katie and is attacking her. And it just feels like kind of counterintuitive to M3GAN's like core programming and value. But I guess it's because Katie ordered Bruce to attack, and that made Katie like a threat to M3GAN now. But I never thought M3GAN would go and hurt Katie. But she was unhinged at the end, so I guess she was just unhinged. This might be too boring for this type of movie, but like, I expected some sort of legal repercussions for Gemma because of the liability of having created M3GAN and M3GAN having murdered so many people. I mean, she staged the murder-suicide. The little boy Brandon was kind of an accident because he was run over by a car. The dog was never found, and the neighbor is the only murder that is very mysterious and like it could be pinned to M3GAN. I fully expected Gemma to be arrested at the end for like indirect murdering of somebody through creating M3GAN and coding her. Maybe something about liability will come up in the sequels, maybe not. But I was kind of interested in that, and it got me thinking, like, who is liable for an AI killing people if it kills people? Liability is very difficult to figure out for artificial intelligence. So I want to wrap it up with this review I saw that summed up the movie really well for me by Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian. Derivative though M3GAN undoubtedly is, true, there are some adroit satirical touches about dolls as toxic aspirational templates, dolls as parodies of intimacy and sensitivity, and tech itself as a sinister child pacification, with kids given iPads the way Victorian children were given alcoholic gripe water. I liked those 3 points about M3GAN. First, dolls as toxic aspirational templates. How M3GAN looked, it was very like idealized, you know, big eyes, blondish hair, all done up and cutesy. But also how M3GAN behaved, it felt like very morally perfect. She was always telling Katie like, wash your hands, flush the toilet. Of course the doll is going to be perfect, and of course Katie as a human child will never be able to meet the level of perfection that M3GAN has. And then the next point is dolls as parodies of intimacy and sensitivity. To me, this is about how M3GAN was able to comfort Katie by saying all the right things about grief, despite not having any feelings herself. Like M3GAN is able to comfort Katie by just being programmed to say the right things. It's all performative. Like these feelings and comforting isn't real. But is it because it worked? I don't know, but it's interesting. And then the last thing I already touched on, just tech itself as sinister child pacification. And I am not against giving a kid an iPad. Like, please. It is a miracle worker for parents. But basically, technology is messing up our brains permanently, and that is scary to think about. Humans are gonna evolve to depend on it like an appendage, and we're already there, but now people are being born into it, and that was kind of the most interesting lesson and clear lesson of M3GAN. All in all, I had a lot of fun with this movie. As deep as you can read into it if you want to, it was mostly just fun. It was absurd. There were lines that just made me laugh. The caricatures of millennials were funny. Gemma's boss being toxic. M3GAN and her character design, her lines, her creepiness. The moments where M3GAN is all messed up, hilarious. I don't get to cover a lot of horror movies, so I was excited to have one that I could enjoy and have fun with. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, whether you loved it, didn't like it, what you took away from it. I would love to hear about it. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed. I put out new videos once or twice a week about TV, pop culture, internet trends, and other miscellaneous things. And you can follow me at Miscellaneous on Instagram or Twitter to find out about new videos, or just turn on the bell notification here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.